What's up, everybody? Chris Douglas here with You Me Spirituality, and today I have my special guest,
Tawnya Marie.
Tawnya Marie. So Tawnya has been my, I'd say, spiritual awakener, emotional life coach, and intuitive coach as well. We're about to complete Rainbow Ray Healing.
Yes.
Which has been the most magical experience of my life.
Good.
It has been so cool. And signing up for this class, I had no idea what to expect. And then I just kind of and you even told us expect the world just to do crazy stuff, right?
Yes.
And you almost were putting the fear of God in us, and I was like,
a little bit in the beginning.
But
yeah.
it was good because I took it as what's gonna happen here? And then it was just little bits and pieces of my life are coming back to the surface of stuff that I suppressed. And then it just magically led to the domino effect of solving this problem, solving that problem. And it was literally one by one by one. And we had a really cool flow through the class where we went through the chakras. And I was never a chakra guru. I was never this deep into spirituality. And I was more of the kind of zodiac guy. And then this just opened up a whole new world to me that has been just magical and fun.
Good. I'm glad.
And it's been life changing. Literally, I think, what did we start in March?
Yes, our first class, our intro was in March, and then we started in April.
And oh my gosh, thinking back, this year's gone by fast.
Yes.
I never thought anything of this nature would go this fast, or more or less, every Monday we have class, and I'm just oh, I can't wait till 6 o'clock. And then sometimes it's even been oh my gosh, I got all these obstacles to get around to make sure that I can still go to class. And then I had a couple absences, but...
No, you did good. So what month do you think was your epiphany?
The epiphany. So it all started, March was a big month. When we first did our first video, I was getting these crazy headaches. I was just literally feeling my toxic energy just shoving itself out. And then I'm trying to think when the seasons turn. Whenever we started the tree meditations was they're really just everything started opening up. But it was almost that's when I was hitting a high coming in. So that was probably Taurus season. Taurus, so I'd say May, June-ish. And then Gemini hit, and it was all over the place, and I was what are we doing? And then it was really good. It really just opened me up to a whole new perspective, really got me more of focusing on my thoughts, what my thoughts were creating, and then how to really master all of that into one big bucket, and then recover from all my emotional stuff I suppressed from the past.
Isn't it fascinating how we do that?
Yeah, it's crazy because it was stuff that I was digging up. I was oh gosh, I never knew that caused this. But then looking back, a lot of the stuff that happened in my life happened for a reason. And if it didn't happen, then I would not be doing anything near what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And it's this point in my life is everything's just opening, or it's circling back of making sense of everything that happened, why it happened. And I'm more grateful. Yes. And I've learned to not judge anything of that nature and just allow it to literally flow.
Yeah, allow the process.
Yeah, and that's been the biggest part too, is just if something happens now, instead of going oh gosh, why is this happening? I'm just curious to see what this
where is this going?
Yeah, what opportunity. So let's talk about just tell the people who you are. What do you do? What is your passion?
So my name is Tawnya Marie, and I am a spiritual emotional mentor, an intuitive healer, empath, been born and raised, sensitive, as everyone say, Cancer. He's all about the astrology.
Yeah, her astrology is super sensitive and super emotional, which, that puts you, without that astrology, would you be where you're at today?
Oh, no. I'm one of a kind.
Yeah, no, exactly. You have all the cards for exactly what you're doing, and I think that's really deep.
Yeah, and I think it is fascinating when you study or you get your chart read and you talk about astrology, how where you were in the beginning of your life and you move through all these times, peaks in your life and your lows, teenage years, adolescence, into your 20s, how it all makes complete sense.
Yeah.
You're oh wow, I really was that. I went through that. And then when you kind of read about yourself, you kind of dive into more of who you are, and that you kind of talked about it. Everything that we may have gone through was a teaching moment.
Mm-hmm.
And
it makes you a warrior now, right?
Yes, a warrior. That's a good way to put it. When you're in it, you don't feel like it.
No, absolutely.
You feel like a hot mess. But when you're going through it, when you can look from a different perspective and realize that where you were is exactly where you needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a new perspective coming out of it. And that's why when we talk about it in the Rainbow class, or when I do my one-on-one sessions, people don't like the word heal. They don't want to heal. They don't want to move into a place of healing because it has been projected to be a scary thing.
And I feel like healing from the hospital standpoint is like scary. You got to go to the doctor and you got to get your treatment to heal. But then also people, we're in a millennial era of like here and now.
Yeah, we're expecting everything.
Yeah, and big pharma is like the quick answer, right? Like take this pill, you'll feel better, but you'll get a ton of side effects. But then people hear the word heal and they're like, that sounds like a lengthy process.
Yeah, nobody wants to work for it.
But it's like the way, especially I don't know how your thoughts are on this, but the universe is really big about like the greater the obstacle, the greater the reward. So if you take a little pill, your little reward is like, ooh, I feel better for a day. But if you heal all the way down to the roots of the emotions and the emotions that, really are that trapped energy that is stagnant, and then all the fire comes in and goes straight to that point. As soon as you resolve that negativity, then you have all this space that is cleared for positive energy to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I've learned from your class too. It's just like, create space, let all this stuff go, and then voila, you can bring in whatever you want.
Yes.
And when you let go of a bunch of stuff too, magically, it's like all you can do is attract positivity to put in there.
That's right. That's co-creating with the universe.
Yes. And it's like, don't resist the universe. Allow it to just come in and be a part of it.
That's right.
So let's talk about your new venture.
My new venture.
So Tawnya Marie is doing Tawnya Marie. What's your heart class called?
Okay, so the page is Tawnya Marie, the Heart Girl. I have had a long, extensive life about my heart.
I was gonna say, and you're a Cancer. So the Cancers are all about the heart.
Yes.
You're a numerology 9,
yes,
which is the emotional teacher. And then your rising sign is Virgo.
Yeah.
And your moon is Aquarius.
Yes.
So that was part of her astrology that is like so emotional.
Yeah.
But you can't have emotions without your heart being a part of it, right?
That's right. So I was always known as super sensitive, over emotional, and never really knew how to focus that energy until I got older. Everybody just classified me and kind of put me in, she's emotional, she's too sensitive, here she goes again. That's just kind of how I've always been classified.
Yeah.
You make a judgment about somebody within like the first 30 seconds. I learned that in college in psychology. And it's when you step back and you realize, oh my gosh, I do that. That's when you're talking about the judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my whole life. I was judged, put in a category.
And you can feel people judging you too.
Oh, yeah.
With the empathic,
yeah,
being empathic. Like,
yeah. And I was definitely raised where it was a harder life than most.
Mm-hmm.
So I did get labeled as a chameleon, as I was trying to fit in with everybody else. And as a child, that's what you do. You try to fit in because you're trying to find your way in the world. So I had heart surgery. I was the first case in New Mexico at the age of 2. I had a subaortic mass that was around my heart and leaky valves. And they told my parents that they didn't know how long I was going to live.
Mm-hmm.
So from the age of 2 to 16, I was in and out of the hospital multiple times. Had quite a few catheterizations, 1 angioplasty. And then at the age of 16, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's just crazy. This is like from a medical standpoint, this is like your cardiac nightmare. This is what they teach you about in school. And then in school, you're like, I will never see or hear this. Like, and those are like giant obstacles.
Yeah.
But it's like your heart came down to earth broken. And now look what you've repaired it to and what you're able to do with it. Like the obstacles that you're talking about here.
Yeah. It was intense because every time I'd have to go to the doctor every 6 months. And we lived 3.5 hours away from the major hospital where the cardiologist was. So we had to make this drive, x-rays and EKGs every 6 months.
Yeah.
And a doctor always telling me that, my parents, they didn't know how much longer I was going to have. So I had to have special PE where I couldn't exert myself. I couldn't run. I couldn't do all the things like the other kids. So I kind of got tired of doing that life. I think at the age of 11, my mom wrote down, she's like, well, it was after one of the appointments and one of my surgeries, and it was awful. And I would get sick after anesthesia. And every time I've had to have an angioplasty, the stories are pretty awful.
Yeah.
And I was sick after the anesthesia. I would throw up all the time. All the time. I was so sick. And I'm very sensitive to medicine. And she said, well, why don't you write down all the things you want to do before you die? So imagine an 11-year-old telling your child that,
Yeah. I mean, that's crucial. I mean, like, so the psychology of a kid around 7, it's always like 4 to 7's like your big peak, but then what is it, 11? So that's shifting you right in like the adolescence. So now you have all these emotions, and then you're being told like write down everything you want before you die.
Yeah.
Like,
so you're like thinking, okay. So it was just something to kind of, what do you kind of want to live for? I understand why my mom had wrote that down, because it's like, well, let's think about like the positive things, because we'd always go to the doctor and they would never know. And I was continuously not doing well. Yeah. And then I was active in cheerleading, but I couldn't run and do some of the other stuff that everybody else could. So then at 16, I said, I'm done. Yeah. I want a valve replacement. So at 16, I had a valve replacement, and he was a donor's valve. Okay. There was a lot of stuff that happened because my aunt was a nurse. So she was there in the operating room. So I got to know a lot of stuff after the surgery. My surgery was 12 hours long. I was the first person in and the last person out. And you could say I died on the table, because when they took me from the heart-lung machine off and they tried to get my heart to beat, it wouldn't beat.
Is that back? So you've talked about an out-of-body experience. Was that when you had one? No,
I had my first NDE when I was 2. That was my first experience of like, I woke up during the surgery and the doctors around me. And then with going back through and doing like a kind of like a hypnosis technique is when I realized that I was standing next to Jesus. That was at 2. No, it was later when I had my second NDE. So my mom was in the waiting room, and she immediately knew something was wrong. And she just told everybody in the waiting room, stop and pray because something's wrong. My grandma was 3.5 hours, and she was driving, and she knew something was wrong. She just pulled over and started praying.
Oh, wow. So it was like the synchronicity just hit everybody. Yeah. Or like the family telepathy, which...
Yes.
I don't know. I've played around with telepathy a couple times. Like, it's fun. It's crazy. But in that instance, like, it's crazy how it works. Like, everybody's just like on the same page.
Yes.
As all this is happening.
So my mom was just told everybody to stop and pray. And from the heart and lung machine to get me to beat, if anybody has ever known about biopsies or anything, or has anything related to cardiac, they know that it usually your heart starts pumping pretty quickly. Yeah. And well, mine didn't. And they had to take my heart back out of my body and literally massage it to get it to beat. Yep. So it was quite some time before that had happened. So then I went into the recovery, and I was in ICU, and they overdosed me on morphine, and I was supposed to get up right away, and they gave me codeine and found out I was allergic to it. My lung collapsed, and I had to have breathing treatment. So I was supposed to be out of the ICU. You're supposed to be up walking, and I wasn't. So I was out for 2 days in morphine. And then when they figured out that my lung had collapsed, they had to roll me over with the tubes and everything else and beat my lungs, my rib cage, until let my lung pop. So it was pretty a rough 7 days of trying to recover. It was probably one of all the surgery was the most brutal. So then after that, I physically felt better, but with your chest being cracked open, it was a long recovery.
Oh, for sure.
So,
and a part of being a teenager going through all this, and then your recovery, your surgery, all the emotions, like...
Yeah, I was a sophomore in high school.
Yeah, and then having to be pulled away from all that, and then peer-to-peer, like, you want to be like all the other kids, but now you're like 100% out of it. You just had a surgery. I mean, that had to be emotionally taxing.
It was hard, because I was in cheerleading and wanted to go to camps and do all the stuff, but I was in recovery all summer. So it was rough.
But does it all make sense now? Especially now, I mean, with your life path, being an emotional teacher, like, you went through an emotional train wreck.
Yeah.
But how much did you learn from it? And then I think that's endlessly what you help people with now.
Yes, and that's why I've known as the Heart Girl. So that's where the Tawnya Marie, the Heart Girl, comes in. I've always been known as the Heart Girl, because I've had so much traumatic incidents.
Big heart, cold hands, right?
Right, definitely. So, so that's my new page, and I've throughout my life, I married my high school sweetheart young.
Mm-hmm.
We had 2 children. And that marriage kind of dissolved, and we realized that that wasn't the best decision.
Yeah, there's probably another emotional lesson for
yes.
you.
So we were together for about 10 years, had 2 children, and I was a single mom for about 3 years. I was an insurance agent. Well, I was a dental assistant first, then an insurance agent. I was active in Rotary, ambassador of the Chamber of Commerce. I was in a small town,
Okay.
so I was very active in business. Met my husband on an online dating site.
Okay.
Moved from...
Was it a heart-based online dating site? Did it have heart in the name?
It was Match.
Okay.
So,
I think they have 2 hearts on that.
there you go. So moved from New Mexico to Wisconsin, and it was challenging growing up in a small community because you had a lot of naysayers. You had...
Oh, for sure. I would say the biggest resistance I get from anything I'm doing now at the very beginning was like, I grew up in this really Catholic-based town where everybody went to the same church. We were all a bunch of small city farm kids. And they're like, what are you doing now? Like, what is this witchcraft and wizardry? And I was like, it's nothing like that. But I was like, when the time's right, you guys will understand it.
Right. Well, and that's where I've always been spiritual. That's where I was raised. So it was challenging kind of coming into something where my husband is super religious. And I said, spirituality is the essence is love.
Mm-hmm.
Where we just don't identify to everything. Like, Jesus is my rock. He's my dog. But I understand and get along with everything and realize that everything is love. So
exactly.
That's why I try not to tie myself to anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just understand that if the value and the very basics is love, then that's all that matters.
Mm-hmm. That's what every religion across the board, I think there's like 3,924 maybe.
Yeah.
But they're all based on love and karma. Like, do right, receive. I mean, what you do is what you get. Everything's a mirror. And then they all have, Jesus is a part of every religion at some point, or an ascended master. And it's like, all they do is teach to do what's right and to love one another. And then you'll live happy. And when you love yourself, you'll love everybody around you and they'll love you.
Right.
And but religion almost breaks off into like all these little segments of where people are like, let's really focus on this. Let's really focus on this.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I always tell people, like, I put the spirituality above religion because it's like all kind of encompass, just like a ball of everything in one. And then you can pivot out to like what your segments are below.
Well, and you brought up a good point when you said love yourself. And I noticed that through my life and through the trauma and through being categorized and putting in a box so much that you're this, you're that I didn't love myself.
Yeah.
And that's where I really focused my energy. The stress of being a single mom and trying to provide and barely making ends meet. And then when I had met my husband and feeling the love that I had for him, I began to love myself and find the journey of self-love. So that's when I really tapped into myself and where have I not given myself enough love? And I started my yoga practice and meditation. And that's really when the door had opened. And it was so cliche at the moment because I was like, oh, I guess this is what all the yogis do. Like, you meditate, you meet your spirit guide, you have all these encounters. Like, I just assumed everybody was doing this who did yoga and meditated, not knowing that people begin to live so much in the mind and separate from the heart.
Yeah, that's what I've been working on, kind of getting out of this thing and into this thing.
Yeah.
And I've read a ton of books lately too that really focus on the manifesting abilities of the heart versus the mind are like, it was 1,000 or like 10,000 times higher as soon as you follow your heart in something rather than let your mind lead your heart. And
because your mind is
it's like a terminal. It's kind of like the transmitter of like messages.
But your mind locks your history.
Yeah, very true.
So everything that if I would have stayed only with my mind, because I've had so much traumatic incidents, therefore my future would follow with that.
Yeah, then you get lost in your past almost, right?
So then when you fall into what feels good, what's what you want to, not what you think, what you feel. So it becomes where you align to your heart and what do I really want to feel? What do I want to
Tawnya
express?
is all about feeling. Like,
yes.
I'll
Some
text
people
her
are like,
and
I don't want to talk about my feelings, and I'm like, but this is who you are. This is what your reality is.
Yeah.
It's everything you feel, everything you want to feel, is within you, but it matches your reality.
Yeah.
So if you feel like crap, it's because everything around you feels like crap. If you are out of sync and you're not out of alignment with your heart, that becomes your reality. So this is what I teach. I talk about emotions.
This is like a mini class right here.
Yeah, it is a little taste. So, but that's where I bring people into their center, into who are you? Not your name.
Yeah, not your ego. Nothing
not your label.
Ego-based. Like literally like the onion example.
Yes.
She strips away every layer of the onion until you're like, what is left in the center?
Yes. And I have
that was a tough concept. It was like, that's ego. Oh, that's ego.
Yes. And then you have to really think of, okay, well, what is the essence of you? When you die and you leave this body, what is that? And I asked that to my husband. He's like, well, I don't want to think that. A lot of people fear death because they think of the concept, what is going to leave? Yeah. And I'm afraid of hitting that realm. And I will tell you, it's absolutely blissful.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I've been. So I've been around, I've had 2 family deaths. And before that, I was in nursing. So in every family death lately, I've been a part of. But my first one was like the eye-opening experience of like, that's just a body now. And it was just like so different. But it's like the second death was more of like, all right, let's get him to the other side. Let's make it quick. Let's make it like peaceful. Like it gave me a whole different idea. And then seeing all the post-funeral activities, I'm like, these are so silly to me almost, because it's like the soul is gone. And then the soul is like, traveling around, or it can like make contact with you and it's there. But it's like the body and how much people fascinate about the body. I'm just like, that's kind of creepy.
So if you master in this lifetime, connecting with your soul, connecting with this energy source that's within you, within your heart, because this is what continues and your body fades away, then your illusion of this world begins to fade.
Gotcha. And that's what I'm going through on the pattern right now. I was letting go of illusions and chaos right now.
He's like, I'm on this.
Oh, it's been wild.
So this is where I try to bring people and I guide them into their center. So when the moment of transition begins, not only do you not fear, but you're excited. So you're excited for every moment and realize that it's a continuous cycle. And the physical is only a stepping stone.
Yeah, like that. I'm so just like out of this, really just like the soul is like, where am I going to next is more of my fascination.
Right.
And then I almost live with this motto of like, if I were to die tonight at 7, would I be happy with that? Or would I be like, shoot, I had this, that, and all this stuff to do.
Right.
And it's like, that's almost like, I would want to say right now, I am never afraid to die. I'm just eager to like live, and like achieve to see what is next.
Yes. And that brings a good point, is being in the moment.
Yes.
Because in the moment is when creativity begins.
Yeah.
This is when you begin to feel. We have a tendency to move either very far in our past where we're stuck with emotions of lack, of trauma.
7 years ahead.
Right. So that was my old story, is who I used to be, as a cardiac patient on the edge of, dying and barely living, locked in pain. Or the future self, and everybody asks me, where do you see yourself? And I'm like, you know what? I used to get hung up on that a long time ago. And I realized that that's not a place to be.
Yeah.
Because that's when the magic stops. That's when you stop creating. And that's when you're so striving for something. And everybody would say, well, it's important to have goals. Yeah, but if your goals are leaving you so much where you're not even focusing on the here and now, then you've lost everything.
Here and now is the most important part.
Yes.
That's what I've learned too, is just that the gap.
Yes.
Like here now.
Right now is your reality. You have a choice on what emotion and what you want to feel and how you want this moment to be. Because this moment holds a vibration And every moment that you want to create ultimately creates your future.
That's what I'm just like, I don't even know what to say after that. All right. So now in the present, focusing on the present, what about is there somebody from your past who was really significant in your life, of where you're kind of like fell into and where you're moving towards?
Yeah, I would probably say my grandma.
Okay. And how did your grandma influence your life? Or what was her kind of influential figure in your life?
So she's the one who helped me. She was always my spiritual mentor.
Okay.
She was a master Reiki teacher and what was she called? A minister. I was like,
Okay.
Is that what it was called in her church? I think it was called something. So she was a minister and a Reiki master. She was kind of, I don't know, she always was very special. I was like, very magical, very special.
It's like, I feel the same way. So my grandpa, he was kind of my figure, and he's a Pisces, 2/9/11.
There you go.
And he's like, literally, like, people will tell me I'm his spitting image, but he was like, in my mind, just like, I was connected more to him than my dad, more than my mom. Like, there was just like something. Grandpa and I were on the same wave, and it was always like, I thought of him as like kind of like mystic and like just the smartest guy ever. He would just sit there quietly, but when he spoke, it was like mic drop. I mean, it was always just like, where did you get this from?
Yeah. She was very soothing and healing, and we had a very special relationship.
Okay.
So she was always the kind of my mentor, and I would ask her about spiritual stuff, and she was the one that kind of helped me when I was on my yoga, and when I was doing a lot of yoga and meditating. When I ended up going on a guided meditation, and I met my spirit guide. I didn't know. Like,
yeah,
I was like,
you're like, what is
I was like, hey, this is fun. We're going on a journey. We're in this magical place. Like, it was this land, and it looked like, kind of looked like this wonderful waterfall and forest. I was like, this is fun. So then after I got done, I told her, and she's like, that's awesome, honey. Like, way to go. And so I telling me, like, hey, most people don't do this. She just encouraged me. And I was painting a lot, doing a lot of creativity. And then I was really opening up to my awareness and understanding that, wow, maybe there's a whole lot here. I always knew things, and I just thought I was a really good guesser. Like, growing up as a kid, people would ask me, like, how did you know things? Or how'd you know that? I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'm a good guesser.
Yeah.
Like, I just knew.
Good luck.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I just knew, oh, well, he does this job, and he has this many kids, and I just knew things, and I just thought I was a really good guesser. So I ended up listening to a lot of NDE radios when I was painting. And I was really starting my meditation and my yoga and listening to NDE radio. And then that's when I realized that the experience I had in my 20s was a near-death experience.
Okay.
And I was getting my blood drawn, and I was fasting. And I completely just passed out. I turned white. And I remember her talking to me, and I don't like needles from my past, obviously. And I dropped. And then I remember being in this beautiful white space, and I was like, finally. And I was like, and I remember saying that, and I thought about that the other day.
Finally.
I said finally. I'm like, finally, like, I'm here, and it was warm, and it was bright, and I remember moving away, and it feels like nothing you can describe. And it was and I was moving more closer and closer to this white, and something kept pulling me back, and I was fighting. And I said, no, I'm not going back. I'm not going back. And I was getting pulled. It was like strings on my back, and I was getting pulled, and I was like, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And when they woke me up with the smelling salts, and I was pissed.
Yeah, you're like, no, that was way more.
Right, that was so much better, and I didn't realize until listening to a lot of NDEs that's what I experienced.
Okay.
And according to having a traditional NDE, you're supposed to be flatline. You're supposed to have a machine. Well, my ex-husband, he had passed out. And when we were living away from, he had a job, and we were living in Colorado at the time. He had passed out. I didn't know what was happening, and he kept falling over, and I called the ambulance. And we had been up there a month. I didn't know where the hospital was. I called the ambulance. He was completely out. He was laying down, sit up, and a little bit wild, passed out. I know what was going on with him. And he ended up passing out in the ambulance, and he flatlined.
Oh, wow.
And the EMT came up to me, and he's like, "You're so lucky that he's alive." And we were engaged, about to get married. And he said he completely coded. So they didn't know, and most people, and maybe
That's
doctors
so
will
bizarre.
argue with me, but I will tell you, experiencing it, he said they gave him an IV.
Mm-hmm.
And the needle, because they use a very big needle
Yeah, 60 gauge probably.
yeah,
That's
in the ambulance, he passed out. And he completely flatlined, and then he came back. But you're not usually hooked up when you pass out, so nobody really knows. And they say, well, your brain goes in and it starts beating for you. Well, I will know. I will tell you, a lot of people, and my son was for one, who had an MDE, who had passed out, who went to their side, saw Jesus, had this whole experience, all from passing out.
Yeah.
Because what happens is, when you're in a traumatic incident, you leave your body.
That's so bizarre.
So I knew.
It's like you say that, I just got a flash of a wreck I had when I was like in a teenager, and I was like, oh yeah, there was a second I was probably just like hanging out looking at myself like,
Right.
I wonder how this ends up.
Yeah. And because you leave this, as soon as something traumatic happens to your body, you take off. Like, this is out.
And that's why a lot of people will say, from the medical standpoint, that's like the MDMA effect. Like, if you're about to get hit by a, like, say, bus going 70 and you're parked, everybody who's been in that experience doesn't feel anything because your body releases all that MDMA, which is kind of like the chemical response to the spiritual answer of what's actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that you mentioned all that. That's kind of a cool connection too, because it's like medical field will call it this, spiritual world will call it that.
Right. And then everybody will talk about, oh, well, you hit a tunnel and you hit this, and you're in this bliss.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't describe this.
Yeah.
You just want to go back.
Yeah, no. I know what you mean, because it's like there's nothing. There's just like,
oh, it's
like a deep breath of fresh,
it's amazing.
fresh prana.
And I'm one of the NDE people that they call that got a little gypped because I didn't get to see Jesus. I didn't get into any of that. So you come back leaving a little pissed off.
Yeah.
And I had to wrestle with that. So when I was painting and just letting my creative juices flow, and when I was meditating, I began to understand a little bit more. So then my grandma got diagnosed with cancer, and she did one round of chemo and what the doctors had told her to do, and it ended up coming back pretty significant, which we thought she was in the clear.
Mm-hmm.
And then she went to go get a checkup, and it had gone back and it had spread.
This is like my grandpa's story. Like, this is so crazy.
So
is your grandma an 11?
No, she was a Leo. So I don't know what her time was.
I bet she's an 11. This sounds like an 11 all the way.
So she called me, and we had talked 2 weeks before she got the diagnosis. Mm-hmm. And she kind of told me, she goes, well, so I'm seeing my spirit guides like I'm seeing you. And we both knew that like wasn't good, but we didn't really say much about it. I knew she was having some spiritual encounters. Mm-hmm. And anybody who has dealt with hospice knows this. When they come to the end of when you're about to transition, this is that you'll have experiences. So we talked all about, everything that we've always talked about. It's kind of a repeat, how grandparents are, they kind of tell you the same story. So we had talked, it was our last conversation that I had with her that was in depth. We talked for like 2 hours. So 2 weeks later, we found out that her cancer had gone back. Mm-hmm. And it came back. She thought she had the flu bug, and she was really sick the next day. So my aunt had took her to the hospital, and she was having organ failure, but they were saying, okay, like first they thought of flu bug, then it was your, kidneys. It was like ongoing. Right.
Everything goes at once. Like, it's like, so just as Tawnya was talking about all this stuff and it was getting really fiery, the camera overheated. So we are back.
So we're back on.
And you were going to Florida.
Yes, I was going to Florida because she was in the hospital. She was in ICU. And she was declining quickly. So by the time I got a flight, I head out of Milwaukee at 12, and I landed into Orlando at 5, got to us about 6. She had declined pretty bad. Mm-hmm. So my mom met me, and she's like, I'm glad that you're here. She's not doing well. So I was like, all right. And as soon as I walked into the IC room, the IC area, it hit me. And then I was like, oh, I wasn't ready for that because I lived my whole life in the IC or, in the hospital. So the smell kind of took me back. I had to give myself a minute. And then when I walked in, so I opened the curtains and I was like, shit, Mom, she's dying. Why didn't you tell me? And she was, so she couldn't, she couldn't catch her breath. And
you made flashbacks of Mike. I was like, you're literally telling this story from that angle, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
So I walked in and I was like, hey, Grandma. She's like, hey, and she was touching and sorry, I'm starting to get dizzy. She was like, whew,
hand on the wall.
There we go. She was kind of, she was there, but she was, I could tell she was seeing in between. Yeah. In between, the veil was becoming very thin. So I just sat with her and she said, thank you for coming. My daughter's birthday was 2 days before. So she's like, how was it? And, I was trying to tell her, and we were moving to Kansas City and she was born and raised here. So I said, I want you to come and visit us. And I said, even if you can't, you come and visit us in spirit. You do what you got to do. And in my family, we don't get hung up about death because we know it's just a transition. Yeah. So the doctor came in, and in ICU, you're only allowed to have so many people. And my aunt and my mom was there. So, I had asked questions. I had never gone to medical school, but being in the hospital, you learn. You pick up a few things.
You pick up the lingo pretty quick.
You pick up a few things. So when I was asking some questions, and my husband's father is a doctor. He's now passed, but he was a doctor. So he was asking me some questions also to ask. But I was reading the monitor, and he asked me, he's like, are you a nurse? I said, no, I've had 2 major operations. You look like a nurse. Oh, thank you. I've had 2 operations. There you go. Just a different realm. Yeah. And
you're a nurse on the spiritual level.
That's right. I'm a nurse on the spiritual level. So, and he said that I could stay because he knew I wasn't over emotional. At that moment, I wasn't over emotional.
Yeah, you're calm and collected in that moment,
right? Because I was
familiar with it.
Exactly. It was my comfort. So I was allowed to stay, and we were waiting for my aunt to come over from New Mexico. They were driving the 7 hours it was. Yeah. So they had 3 drivers. They were going to alternate drivers, but we knew we had to intubate her because she couldn't keep up with that. It was bad, yeah. And we wanted to wait till my aunt had came. And my cousin and his wife. So, she said thank you because she knew that was it. So the next day when my aunt had came, actually before then, she started, when we got here that morning, she was doing this motion with a respirator. And I was like, she looks like she's having a seizure. And I was like, and the nurse came in, and I'm like, she's had a seizure. Like, she's having a seizure. And he, of course, who am I to be telling them? Yeah, no, so he was pissed off. So he went and called the doctor, but she was not stable enough to move her to get a CAT scan to see what was going on. We knew at that time that the cancer had gone to her brain because she was, If you've ever seen somebody who's passed, they don't even look like themselves. Yeah. So me and him kind of got into it because I was asking questions, and he's like, don't you notice I've been in here, trying to keep her alive? And I said, do you understand that as soon as my aunt gets her, we're going to let her go in peace? So it was a rough time. Yeah. So when she had gone, when my aunt had got there, we decided that it was my aunt's decisions and my mom to let her off and let her go in peace. So it was kind of awesome because my aunt was giving my grandma a kiss and said, tell Daddy, my grandpa, that I said hello. And she picked her head up and nodded and looked back down. And we were like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like, this is on our deathbed, but, all this energy. So, she had passed. It's a beautiful, transition. And I was giving her a kiss, and we're so attached to the physical that my mom was like, and I didn't cry until I heard my son say, Grandma, I don't want you to die, and started crying because we said, say goodbye to Grandma. And then I lost it. Then I started crying because I heard my son.
I'm a crier. I'm such a crier.
I'm a crier too.
I'm such a Pisces. I'll just be like, I'm ugly crying. Don't look at me.
Well, and I knew that my grandma was ready. she'd been suffering for long enough that it was like, all right, we're done.
Yep.
So, so when I was giving her a kiss goodbye and I was rubbing her hair, I could hear her like I'm talking to you, and she said, "Quit kissing that dead body. You know I'm not in there."
Oh,
and I'm like, and I look around and I'm like, well, that's weird. Like, and like I hear her, and my aunt was all saying goodbye, and we asked for her. Each one of us said, "Show us a sign that you're okay on the other side," and mine was hearts. Hello, I'm the heart girl.
Yeah.
Show me the hearts. So.
Was this the first time you were like clairaudient?
No.
No? Okay. I was just curious. I was wondering if like stuff
had happened before.
Okay.
Yeah. So before I went to Florida,
Uh-huh.
I was laying in bed. It was 2 months before I realized I was even going to Florida. Actually, wait, hold on. No, that was the first time because I'm moving ahead. No, that was the first time.
Because it's like after my grandpa passed is when I started just having like flashes of visions like out of nowhere.
Yes.
And it's like whenever they come in, it's like lately hasn't been anything good. And I'm like, I hope this is wrong.
Right.
But then it's like now I'm starting to get like film shots in my head endlessly. Like I'll see this shot and then I'll be like, I don't want to do a video. And then slowly I'm like, all right, let's do a video. Like it's so crazy. And then I'll see like the shot we were talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, we'll probably end up doing that soon. But
right.
It's so crazy. Like I had this shot of like this woman's head, and now we're talking about doing this nun video that we're playing with, and it's like, oh, that makes sense of what I was seeing.
Yes, so they do truly have you on their side. So yes, that was actually my first one. Now that I'm thinking about it, that's a tricky question. There was episodes that happened before, but we'll go.
Like my grandpa's death, like transitioned so much of his traits into me. It was so like that's when the entrepreneur came out. That's like literally like my life flipped right after his death.
And they help you on the other side.
Yeah, he was because everything I did in healthcare, he was always like, oh, that's good, but he always like never was. He was like interested in it, would talk to me about it, but he was always like thinking of it now, he was like, that's not what you want to do. Like, why are you doing that? But he's like, figure it out for yourself kind of guy.
Right. So I could hear her, and then I was like, oh wow. So 6 months later, and I would meditate, and she would show up, and I was like, hey, what's up? What's up, Grandma?
Got some cookies?
And I would dream about her, and I would always dream about, even before my grandma passed, I dreamed about people who had passed over. Mm-hmm. So when you said about the clairaudient, they would show up in dreams.
Okay.
All the time, show up in dreams. Especially an ex-boyfriend in high school who had died. He'd show up all the time.
I remember you talking about it.
So he would show up all the time, and I could hear him.
He's the one on the East Coast, right?
No, he was in New Mexico.
Okay.
So then I went to 6 months later. I went to go visit my mom and my aunt, and she had asked me, "Hey," she was doing Oprah's 21-day meditation. She's like, "Do you want to meditate?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." It's been a while. So my mom had showed up, and she was over here, and my mom was over here. So we started meditating. And it was kind of weird because I hadn't been back in the house where Grandma lived, mm-hmm. and she was living with my aunt. And I'm sitting here, and somebody was touching my forehead. Like, I could feel it. And my grandma popped in. I was like, "Hey, Grandma, what's up? Like, what have you been up to? I haven't seen you in a while." And
that's so awesome.
And she kind of talked a little bit, and then she goes, "There's going to be a lady in a red dress." And she showed me this flowing red dress. And I was like, okay. She's like, "There's going to be a lady in this flowing red dress that will help you with your questions." And I was like, okay. And I'm like, that's curious. And I'm like, well, what have you been up to? Where have you been? And she kind of had to go. And I was like, all right. And I asked her, I said, well, what if they don't believe me? And she goes, who cares? And I was like, all right, here we go. Whatever. So I had told my aunt, and I told my mom, and I know my mom was kind of thinking like, yeah, okay, whatever. So the next day we ended up going to a medium that night where my husband's mother, who had passed, came in and gave a whole bunch of messages. So that was fun. And then the next day we went to Casa Dega, and it's a psychic town, and they have like bookshops and crystals and everything. And my mom was going in, and she was having her reading, and my aunt and I were in this bookstore, and we're looking at the books and the crystals, and we step outside, and across the street is this woman in this flowing red dress. And I was like, and my aunt's like, oh my gosh, are you gonna go talk to her? I was like, yeah, let's go up to her.
Yeah.
So I looked at her and I was like, are you a psychic medium? And she's like, yeah. Why? Did my boyfriend send you? And I was like, I meditated. My grandma told me that a lady in a red dress that looks like this is gonna answer all my questions. And she goes, we need to talk. And I was like, all right. So I booked the reading. She had no readings that day. She's like, let me go see if I have appointments. She had no appointments. Mm-hmm. So she said, let's go upstairs. So I go upstairs, and she had begun to pick up on my donor's valve and the donor. And she said, "You're not supposed to be here." And I said, "No, I'm not." And the only person who had known that is my mom that was in a reading and my grandma on the other side.
Wow,
and she said, and I said, "No, I'm not."
We see the red flowing dress too. I was like, this sounds like Athena just hanging out.
Right? And I said, "No, I'm not." And she began to go on, and she goes, "Well, you have an extremely great gift." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I was in business. I was an insurance agent. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "You're supposed to be doing this work." And I'm like, "What work? What are you talking about?" She goes, "You're supposed to be, communicating with the angels." And I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm in business. I don't understand. Like, I don't know how this works. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. So she's like, "Oh, it looks very soon, and you'll be getting into this." And she's like, "I'm intuitive." She's like, "I'm a medium, and I don't even dream about my past loved ones." And I'm like, "I thought everybody dreamed about their past loved ones. What are you talking about? Everybody does this." Didn't know that I was different. So then I ended up taking a Charles Virtue, just kind of, you're not crazy class, and everything opened up. That ended up being the following week.
That's real quick. This sounds like your story of meeting that lady was like my story of meeting you. I was like, we were at the fitness convention, and I kept seeing 33. And then I literally walked by your table, and the 33, I remember, was on a chalkboard on the corner, and I was just like, let's go talk to whoever that is real quick. And we walk up, and you're like, "Oh, you're the tech guys." And I'm like, "Oh crap, we're not wearing yes." And I remember saying like, "Oh my gosh, you're really good at what you do."
Yeah, you're.
And it was like, but then it was like, as soon as I met you, it was like everything that I was like, what is happening? Am I turning schizo? Like, am I just like on a bipolar mania right now? Or made so much sense.
Yes.
And it sounds like that's almost like kind of what she was doing to you. Like, you thought it was just like normal.
I thought everybody knew. I'm like, "What do you mean you don't trust your gut? Like, you hear this voice, this sixth sense and this voice in your head. Like, you always trust your instincts." Like, that's what I was raised, so I assumed everybody else had.
And my mom would always say my spidey senses.
I like that.
And then she would always be like, "What are your spidey senses going off?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I got to do this." And then it's like, it just all started making sense.
Right. So I followed my intuition, and I first created a small group page on Facebook. Well, I started readings here, and I booked out in a weekend. And then I started doing it online.
Yeah.
And then I opened my Talking with the Angels page and grew that within a year to over right at 3,000 followers in a year. And then I kind of added beyond because they only kind of associated me with angels.
Yeah. So it's Talking with the Angels and then Talking with the Angels and beyond.
Yeah, because I started expanding. And
which is the hardest thing in business, scaling up.
Yes.
Because you get comfortable and then you're like, but there's more. Or it's always like, my gut is always like, there's more. There's more.
Right.
And
well,
like,
and you're always following your intuition.
Yeah.
And so being classified, and I said this in the very beginning, as a psychic medium, I never associated with. I never liked those words because...
I know you hate those words.
I do. Because it's like, oh, they think you're a gypsy and a bomb. I'm like, I've never been that. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been in business. And I didn't like that.
It's funny you say that because the most successful entrepreneurs, they won't tell you, but I read them like books. They are so spiritual and they know all these spiritual laws and they know pretty much they're almost like the experts who are the spiritual experts that don't tell people they're spiritual experts. But then they also kind of get this manipulative edge to them where they start weaving around. And it's like, you see all these big companies like random court date. Uh-oh, that's karma. What did you do that you shouldn't have done? And it's like, they're really spiritual people.
Right.
And but they don't tell you it.
Well, and they follow their gut.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was like, so when I got kind of classified that, oh, well, you can hear, you can see this, and that's why I said I never associate with the clairs. Yes, I can have all those, but I didn't like to be classified in a box. So then I kind of was like, oh, well, I guess I have to wear these. I gotta look the part. And I never really fit with that. I'm good at what I do, but I just want to be known as me. So I continued on the path and doing that. And then I realized that, I need to not associate with a label. I don't like labels. So I'm
You
like,
have to be outside the box, right?
yeah, I'm like, I don't like labels and I don't want to be associated with that. I want to, and then they were like, well, sensitive and empath. And I've been like this since day one.
Okay.
I was never aware of it. And as soon as they became aware of it, then you got classified into they pigeonholed you into this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're this if you have this and this and this. So about almost a year ago, my guidance said to move in a new direction and closing that page.
Is that due to like some obstacles that you're hitting?
I hit some obstacles. I just being pigeonholed.
Yeah.
If you're a psychic medium, you have this and this, and you're seen.
Yeah,
you're
back was
perceived,
kind of against the wall, and
right? And you're
like,
perceived a certain way.
Yeah.
And that's where I was like, that's not what I am. And then I was wanting to move into a new field, into a new demographic where I can reach more people with my gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And you are your brand.
Yeah, for sure.
And
Branding's everything.
branding's everything. And I wanted to be Tawnya Marie.
Okay.
And not associated to a last name,
Mm-hmm.
because that was either from your father or who you marry. And what about just me? So
I like that.
So that's why I used my first name and my middle name, because before I had a last name, my dad gave me that, or my mother, or whoever, I was just me.
Mm-hmm. I like
So
that.
that's why the Tawnya Marie had come in, and of course the Heart Girl with my whole history, because my focus is on the heart. So I hit a resistance because I didn't want to close my page. My ego came in,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, wow, I've got almost 4,000 followers. I've worked really hard. I have over 80 reviews, and I don't really want to just close this page and walk away and say, that was fun, now what?
Yeah.
So I hit a low, and I said, where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? Because it's hard. And I began focusing on the number and trying to get to, okay, you get information as intuitives, you get information, but
Almost too much sometimes.
it is, but their time doesn't match reality.
Yeah.
These things, we are on a different time than they are. And time is,
They're like on the retrograde speed.
It's like- right. And it's like, and time is illusion, and we can get into a whole other bag of worms. But anyway, so that's when I was like, okay, we're going to go with we're going to move with Tawnya Marie. And it took me until about the past couple months to say, okay, I'm moving in a new direction. And as soon as I did that, I have another show with Cynthia and I,
Which is awesome.
Dr. Foster and I, we do medical intuitive scans where we pick out any physical or emotional blocks within yourself, and we address those, identify them, and give you tools to help you kind of move you in the right direction and start you in your path of healing. And then as soon as I announced that I was closing Talk with Angels and moving in a new direction, I got announced, or Blue TV decided to pick up the show. So so we're really excited that we're taking it to a bigger platform.
Oh, for sure.
And entrepreneurs.
And it will take off.
Thank you.
It's such a novelty.
So we're excited to be on their platform, that they're giving us an opportunity to help reach a bigger diagram, or a bigger audience.
Demographic.
Thank you, dear. Yes. I'm like, hello. And people to realize that you're not a label.
Yeah.
And that everybody has these gifts. And when you begin to center within your heart and realize who you are behind the CEO, behind the mother, behind the father, the wife, what you are, and who you are to the core.
Layers.
Yes, and to the core of who you are is when you realize your divine magic and who your essence in this world, and you pull that out.
What's your little like secret sauce, or like what's your one string in this whatever guitar? Like what's your magic chord?
Right. So that's kind of what I do. That's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah, that was a big nutshell. That's a lot.
It is a lot. It is a lot. Everyone, and my daughter's like, that's going to take for hours. That's going to take forever. Telling your story.
We might have to break it. We might have to have some fun with how we chop this.
Yes.
But
so thank you for letting me be on your show.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you for creating this channel and this space for people to talk about it.
Thank you so much. I think your story will be really, really impactful for others too. I've mentioned you in other videos, so people are probably like, who is this person, if they haven't looked you up. So I think it's really good because it's like, your story is so, everything in life balances out, right? especially we were just having a Libra conversation off camera. But,
Right.
Everything balances out. So you went through all your suffering early.
Mhm.
So I feel like you're just like right at the end of that where it's just like gonna go like everywhere you want it to be.
Yes, and we get, I think, judged when we've had so many struggles and you have the knowledge and they're like, you're so young.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you don't know where I've been.
Yeah, but
You
that's
haven't
like,
walked in my footsteps.
yeah, and that's where that's Life Path 9. I mean, 100% is like you get hit so much, you can become so wise so early because you lived through literally like hell at the beginning of your life to get you to where you want to be later in your life.
Yes.
So
yeah. So
and
thank you.
Where can people find you? What is your new page? What is
So Tawnya Marie, the Heart Girl, and it's going to be TawnyMarie.com. That's coming. My new website is in the works. And Cynthia and Tawnya. And all my videos are on YouTube. Tawnya Marie and Cynthia and I show is on YouTube, and it will be on Blue TV coming soon.
And Blue TV, that's accessible through, what do you say, Roku,
Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.
Cool.
So yeah, that's all the places you can find me.
Woo-hoo. Anything else? Any takeaways?
I don't think so. Follow your intuition, fall into your heart, and believe that you can conquer anything within inside of yourself as soon as you begin to know yourself.
Ooh, I like that. Because when you know you just have to, it's a mirror, right?
That's right.
Wear your heart on your sleeve.
Always.
Let it get hurt because then you can heal it.
That's right.
Right?
Become the master healer.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out yumispirituality.com. Get your reading. And make sure you like, subscribe, and comment below. Thank you guys. Have a nice day.